Hey, I'm Nathaniel Fawson. I'm a professional archaeologist. I have been for 10 years, and this channel is devoted to the archaeology of North America, in particular the region that we call the Eastern Woodlands. Now, as some of you will know, I'm not a paleo specialist. Most of my work deals with the Archaic period, which came afterwards. But paleo seems to be the biggest draw for a lot of people getting interested in archaeology, especially in North America, because people tend to get drawn to either the really oldest stuff or the earliest stuff or the most complicated stuff. And while Clovis is certainly not the oldest, its culture in North America, it's the oldest that is pretty well defined and understood outside of the more recently understood Western STEM tradition, but that's a topic for another video. The problem that I keep running into is that when archaeologists use the word culture, we're typically talking about something very different from how the average English speaker is using the word culture. And to kind of illustrate this, I'm gonna kind of walk through a thought experiment. So imagine you're an archaeologist 10,000 years from now, 10,000, working in what used to be the United States. And the archaeological community finds a very particular kind of cast iron skillet that looks like this in a town called Clovis, New Mexico. And this skillet is it stands out because it has these two little indentions on either side that appear to be to help with pouring fluid out of the skillet. You can see in the picture that they're very minor indentions, but they're noticeable. And over the next several decades of excavation, archaeologists find that this style of cast iron skillet was found all over the continent, and was actually even more prolific kind of further to the east, in kind of the Appalachian Mountain region and the flatlands on either side. Now they're not finding anything else. The time period that these things are dating from is between like the late 1800s through the 1900s and a little bit into the 20th century, but this particular style tends to be on the earlier side of that. And they're not finding clothing, they're not finding buildings, they don't find human remains. The only thing that they're finding that's identifiable to, this time period is this double indented cast iron skillet called the Clovis Skillet. And so then people start talking about there being a Clovis culture. And years more research happen, and people start finding that kind of at the end of the Clovis Skillet period, a new kind of skillet starts to show up that looks like this. It's pretty similar, you can see, but those indentions on either side are much more robust and more defined, and also these tend to be, on average, smaller than the old Clovis skillets, and these were found near another town called Folsom. So this is the Folsom Skillet culture that kind of grew up and then replaced Clovis Skillet culture. And at a certain point, Clovis skillets stop showing up in the record. They don't really appear in any dated context after a certain date. We'll say like 1920, and after that the bigger, more robustly indented but smaller Folsom skillets become the norm and the standard. And again, still not finding any house structures or human burials or clothing or any of the other elements of culture that we would, obviously you're not finding recordings of music or stories or oral traditions or anything like that. All you have to go on are these skillets. That is what it's like dealing with what we call Clovis culture. Now, as all of us living in the 20th and 21st century know, the talk about a slightly indented cast iron skillet culture as being some kind of fundamental unit of human beings that is connected to genetics and language and all these other things that we tend to think about in terms of culture, is on the face of it ridiculous, because people of all ethnic groups use cast iron skillets, people of all socioeconomic backgrounds use cast iron skillets, people speaking different languages use cast iron skillets. These things proliferated during the 1800s with the Industrial Revolution and the increased availability and ability for these things to proliferate. And because they were so effective and durable and had a really long lifespan to them, they became very popular all across the country where they were available. So that's really what Clovis culture is. It's not a culture as we think of it. It is, the other word for it is a techno-functional complex, which no one really wants to say that because it's a mouthful and it sounds unnecessarily pedantic. So when people go around talking about how such and such a comet impact wiped out Clovis culture, when the thing that stopped happening was people stopped making Clovis points and started making the nearly identical but slightly smaller Folsom points in some regions, and then Cumberlands and others, and so on and so forth. That's really the argument that's being made. And when you actually understand what we mean by a Clovis culture ending, what we're talking about is a type of technology that people stopped using. The people themselves probably weren't one homogeneous, interrelated thing in the first place, at least not as closely as we'd like to think. And certainly nothing along the lines of they all belong to the same tribe or nation or anything like that. And what appears to have happened was that when at the onset of the Younger Dryas, the environment started to shift and the kinds of game that were available started to change. People changed their technology to accommodate that new landscape and that new bioscape that they were living on. There's some indication that populations did go down, but nothing indicating that people were nearly driven to extinction, certainly not in North America. That's why I say there's good cultural continuity between Clovis and Folsom, because they are about as similar as those two styles of cast iron pan that I put up on screen earlier. So that's all I've got to say about that. If you've got any questions or comments or infuriated rants, you may put those in my comments section. I look forward to reading them. And as always, thank you for watching.